Welcome to Proverbs 31 Creatives. My name is Brianna Coleman. I'm so excited for this new chapter in my walk with the Lord. My goal with this podcast is to encourage other women to grow their creativity, entrepreneurship, finances, life, health, and most importantly, grow closer to Jesus. I'll be having conversations with guests with anointed women in faith and learning right along with you. Are you ready to start your journey to become the creative Proverbs 31 woman you've always wanted to be? All right, let's go. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Proverbs 31 Creatives. I'm your host, Brianna Coleman. I am so excited today to talk to Brittney Davis. She is a prophetic, bold, spoken word poet. She is an author, and her story is absolutely incredible. I know I was so moved by it, and so I am so excited for you guys to get to hear it today. Brittney, welcome to Proverbs 31 Creatives.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Of course, yes. I'm just going to shout out Instagram. If you guys are not on Instagram threads at this point, I think it's every single interview that I thank Instagram threads for connecting us with amazing guests. And so I came across your story and it just was incredible. And with our theme this month being healthy stewardship, I really just wanted to sit down and have a conversation with what does stewardship look like when life is lifing, when life is hard? How do we steward and become a good steward of the word when life is just trying to knock us down 1-2 punch? So tell us a little bit about yourself and then we'll go from there.
Ooh, that question. I'm so excited now.
Yes.
So I am 36. By the time I was 25, I had lost both my parents, all of my biological grandparents, and I just found myself kind of in like this whirlwind of grief, and I didn't know it. I was always kind of like into church. I wasn't forced to go to church. I kind of just always had a desire to go. So we didn't go every Sunday, but by the time I was like 15, I was going on my own. My stepmother had introduced me to her church, got baptized. I always honestly believed. That sounds so crazy. Like I wasn't always saved, obviously, but I always like believed, and I think that was intentional. And we can get into that later. But so I got saved at 15. Went to college, wilded out a little bit first couple years. And I got into a point probably around 21 where the Lord allowed a very like pivotal heartbreak to happen, which led me into being very serious about him. And so ever since then, I've just been pivoting and moving with God with all of the ebbs and flows.
Yes, absolutely. And he is our solid foundation, our rock at which we stand on. And I feel like your story is definitely a great example of that. So tell us, how did you get into poetry? I love this. How did you get into poetry?
Yeah, so since I could write, I would have a diary. I had a journal. So I would be documenting my day around, I would say, high school. Beginning of high school, I started writing poetry. Just, I want to say randomly. I don't even remember like what triggered my mind to do that. But I started writing poetry in my journal. I loved Maya Angelou. Like she was one of my biggest inspiration. I loved her story about how, she was mute and silenced and didn't really talk. And I kind of felt the same way, that nobody really understood me. And so I had to put it in writing. And so I started writing poetry in my journals. I finally got, I think, brave enough to do an open mic night. So poetry turned into spoken word. Around 2008, I was at a Christian open mic, and I was like, oh, okay, like, this is a thing. I wrote the poem for my dad's obituary in 2009 and ignorantly said, I don't want to do this anymore. This is cool, but he won't be here to see anything. Well, around 2013, I was at an open mic night at Michigan State. That's where I went to school. And a longtime friend that I had not seen in years just happened to be there. And he was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, well, I thought about getting on the mic, but I don't know. I'm just going to chill out tonight, Unbeknownst to me, he put my name on the list. And I won first place that night. And my pastors at the time were like, this is ministry. Like when you get up and do spoken word, you're
Mhm.
actually like preaching. Like the content in your poems, like you're really like using the word to in a creative way. And
Yeah.
so then I really started like, oh well, this is a gift. It's not just something like fun that I do. Like people are actually being touched, and God is using me. And
Yeah.
so I started getting really serious about it. Started taking events, and then in 2017, I met my poetry group, and that really shifted me because we were all at a unrelated event. We met,
Mhm.
and then the two guys in my group were like, well, God has been talking to us about starting this group. We just didn't know like how it was going to happen. And we think like this is it. And so we started focusing on mental health, and we started focusing on hard hitting issues. And they really challenged me that you don't have to do poetry in a churchy way. And my
Right.
mentor had already told me, she said, what are you saying when you get off of the stage? Like what you say on stage is great, but what happens when people flock to the stage afterwards? Like what do you have to say to them? And so I started really having a goal. Like I want to tell my story to the point where somebody that might not have outwardly said what they were going through comes up to me afterwards and asks, how did you get through that? And I think that's
Wow.
what my poetry collective has been able to do. We've been able to hit raw subjects like loss and grief and mental health,
Mhm.
justice, and really get the response from people and touch people's hearts and do ministry in an unconventional way.
Wow, that is so beautiful. And I love the fact that even through your heartbreak of, writing for your dad's obituary, like that the Lord used that to then propel you into your purpose, into your season, into, because you said you were writing before your dad's obituary, correct? Okay.
Yes, I was.
But it's just so cool to see how the Lord used like such that heartbreak, that you were going through to then, I mean, it shifted your whole life. And so what did that look like during that time frame of when you were going through that loss? Like what did life look like?
Um, Life was, I felt numb. Like my dad raised me in a single parent household. My mom passed away when I was 3 months old. And so like he was my everything. He was an awesome provider, an awesome father. And
Hmm.
so that literally pulled the rug up under me. I was in the middle of my college career. So
Yeah.
I'm like, what is a bill? Like I didn't know he paid all these bills for me.
Yeah.
And really just not know realizing I didn't know God as Father. I only knew him as Lord. And so
Wow, that's so powerful.
yeah, it that was a very pivotal moment for me where the Lord literally had to teach me like one, I'm not because my dad was strict, he was no
Hmm.
nonsense, old school parenting. And so
Yeah.
the Lord really had to teach me the other side of his character. And
Yeah.
so for a moment, it was just going through the motions. It was going to work, trying to stay in school, getting kicked out of school because of grades, and trying to work a full time job. And so for a moment, it was just existing. Um,
Mhm.
I was also part of the gospel choir at MSU, and so trying to thinking that that was helping me, being
Right.
in like leadership and things like that. And so I think I just got to a point in 2016 where one of my pastors said, "You're trying to get over something that you need to walk through,"
Yeah.
and I didn't know like the example of grief that I had was this happens, you move on and you exist the best that you can. Like therapy
Right.
was not a thing, counseling was not a thing. And so when he said those words to me, it kind of affirmed the fact that no, this is something that I have to process through. Um,
Right.
so I was praying for everybody else. When somebody would lose somebody, I would be praying for them, but I didn't know that that was available to me, like
Mhm.
from other people and through Holy Spirit. And so
Right.
I think I started taking healing seriously. I got into therapy, started processing through those feelings and knowing how to manage them, right? Because
Hmm.
it's still to this day, like when I had my children 3 years ago, my dad had been passed for 10 years. Well, grief started coming up because you start thinking like, oh my gosh, he would have been an amazing grandfather. And so
Right.
learning how to process through those things. And so one of the things that Holy Spirit has helped me to do to cope really is to focus on the good things, to focus on the
Hmm.
memories and to really be vulnerable with Holy Spirit because
Right.
like he obviously, he's there and he's going to help us in person and in spirit, but we have to be vulnerable enough to speak to God, to tell him,
Mhm.
like, this is how I feel, so that we can feel comfortable in our relationship with God and pouring out those things to him. Because really, if we think about it, God is the only person with the capacity to handle all of us.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
that's what I really had to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you and I were kind of talking off camera before, and there's really not a place for Christians to grieve and to like really walk through that healing process.
Mhm.
Like the Lord calls us to community, and I feel like in that, like iron sharpens iron. And I love what you were saying when we were talking of how you were wanting to create that place that Christians can process. So what does that look like for you of creating that space?
Yeah, I think it looks more of like a one-on-one thing.
Mm,
Also, a lot of correction. And so, like, when I see people getting frustrated with people who have been grieving for a long time, I might advocate for them. Like,
right.
we don't know where they are in their process. A lot of advocating on not being strong,
Mm,
because the Bible says that when we are weak, God is made strong, and in our weakness, that's where our strength is.
right.
Really advocating on the fact that you don't have to be strong. That's the first thing I tell people, is it's okay to feel your feelings. I tell people,
Right.
don't try to rush through this. Process however long that takes, and like know that God is with you. And so I
Right.
think it's more so of like a one-on-one thing. And then also in my poetry, I talk a lot about grief in my poetry.
Mm,
And so like letting people in that way and giving
mhm,
them, the opportunity to like speak to me afterwards about like anything. I always say I'm an open book. Um,
mhm.
and then, like knowing boundaries too, like giving people like resources. Like this therapy really helped me. Praying through and journaling really helped me. And so I
Mhm.
think that a lot of times we get an idea to do something, and it doesn't have to be like at a maximum scale, right? Like
Right.
literally like just the like one-on-one touches that you have sometimes. So that's what I've been able to do.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think something like this, like the one-on-one, would be way more effective than say like a group setting.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people just need to like word vomit and just like let it all out and, have that safe place to show emotion. I know, and you just said feel the feelings, and sometimes that is probably the hardest part of healing. And I know for me, ever since I'm a year and a couple months without alcohol, without sober, and that's one thing that I have noticed is they don't talk about that, is
Yeah.
people go to their vice, whether that be alcohol or even simply scrolling on your phone, like something, or gluttony, or like food or whatever that is. It's to stop feeling the feelings. And
Yeah.
that is the hardest part of healing, is you feel everything and you have to rely on the Lord. And there's some days you're like, God, I cannot do this without you. I cannot do this day without you. Like, I need you. There's sometimes it's hour by hour, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
And there's just, like, Lord, I need you to help me put one foot in front of the other right now.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it's really, first, congratulations.
Thank you.
Amazing. I think
Thank
it's
you.
very difficult to be reliant, when your faith isn't there. And I think that's
Right.
okay too, to say my faith isn't here right now.
Right.
Um, there was a man in the Bible, and he said to God, after he asked for a miracle for his son, help my unbelief constantly. And
Mm,
that has been my prayer, like help my
yeah.
unbelief constantly. Like I have not reached the place where I've arrived. Like I literally
Right.
like need you. And I think a lot of things happen if you come from like an unhealthy background, like as far as like your community. um,
Right.
they'll teach you that you need to be strong and reliant on God, but without context, that relying on God looks like weakness. Relying
Right.
on God looks like literally telling him, like you said, minute by minute, second by second, I
Yeah.
need you to get through this
Yeah.
moment. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Um, so I know, again, we talked off camera, separating yourself from religion to relationship. You said before how the Lord taught you that he is your father. What did that look like for you?
Oh man.
Feel free. I know that was like a two-part question, so feel free, just take a second.
Yeah, so I was in a ministry where I was licensed as a minister in 2015, 2016, and I thought that that looked like me essentially like being there for others and like forsaking myself in my relationship with God. I thought that I had to have it all together. I thought that, you know, I just had to push through, like even in my moments of mishaps, you know. And so the Lord called me to leave that ministry around 2018, and he was saying like, this has absolutely nothing to do with them, it has everything to do with you and me and our relationship. Well,
Wow.
I did not know that he was going to take me through a year long journey of basically unlearning everything. Actually, no,
Wow.
not 1 year. It was last year was the intentional like 1 year, but
Hmm.
years long journey of just unlearning everything. And so I would be on like social media and I would be seeing statuses and they would really shake me up. Just like all of the like religious jargon and like it just felt like God was not a merciful father. And
Hmm.
so he really had to like I would ask him like, Lord, is this really you? Like, is this what you're saying? Is this your heart? And
Right.
I would go and I would study, and the answer would be no. And so last year I read the entire Bible cover to cover, and through audio listening.
Hmm.
And I remember getting to a point in Jeremiah where I was like, Lord, like, this is really tough. Like, are you really going to give up on them? Like, what? And he's like, Brittany, you already know the answer to your questions. Jesus is
Yeah.
the answer to this. And so what that did is it really helped me to know God's character and
Mm.
know that he was so like even in Old Testament he was so merciful, so patient,
Mhm.
so kind. And so now I'm not as easily shaken as I would have been 6 years ago.
Right.
Now I feel like our relationship is solid because I went through that journey of like knowing him and getting to
Hmm.
know him and reading his word, and I'm doing it again this year and I'm finding new things. And so
That's
it's
so
like,
awesome.
yeah, it's a never ending process, but like going from religion to relationship is just really just knowing God, knowing his character, and being able to identify what is not him has been
Right.
able to like stop a lot of that anxiety and fear that I had experienced my entire life. So
Yeah.
that's my journey has been just unlearning and learning him.
That's so good. That's so good. And I love what you said there, just learning his character, learning who he is. Like I feel like a lot of people they read the page and that's what they take the Lord as. They don't take what's behind the words. It's almost like you have to like scoot the words over and like this is who he is
Yeah.
because it's so much more like the Bible is just so much more than words on a page. Like you really get to know who the Lord is and obviously with walking with him daily, it's just I always say that if a Christian is only talking to the Lord, worshiping the Lord on a Sunday, their relationship is so limited and it's just that's a fraction, that's just a scratch
Yeah.
of the surface.
Yeah.
But once you know his character you learn to just love him and just want to be with him. He's your best friend, he's your father, and I love that so much. So bring us to today. What does life look like today for you?
Oh, oh man, that makes me want to cry. The Lord, oh, he's so faithful. He's so faithful.
Mhm.
I have an amazing husband. I have two beautiful children, and the reason why I'm so emotional is because when you experience like so much loss, like
Yeah.
my mother at 3 months old, it's like, well, am I gonna be here to be
Mm.
with my children? And
Mm.
so it's like looking back, it's like it was all of the pain. It was like all worth it.
Yeah.
He has like redeemed so much.
Mm.
And so yeah, I'm so grateful. I have a husband who is amazing, and what I didn't mention is like through all of that grief, like I was in a few toxic relationships.
Yeah.
just like codependency and like all of the toxic things like fornication, all of the things that that brings. And
Right.
so yeah, God has really like redeemed my time and redeemed what I thought my life would look like. I didn't know that I like desired to have children. I knew
Mhm.
that I wanted a companion, but I didn't believe that I was kind of like worth the unconditional love that I experienced with my husband.
Yeah.
A lot of that religious trauma had me kind of like writing people off just based off of like exterior judgment. And so I almost actually bypassed my husband because of things that people were saying, like, oh well, he doesn't like pray like you, he doesn't preach like you, he doesn't,
Mhm.
sound like you. And the Lord was like, I intentionally did that because you love words, and I
Yeah.
need you with somebody that's not going to give you the words that you'll be impressed by, but these are actions. And he's the epitome
Wow.
of what I deem as love. And so, yeah, God has just redeemed so much.
That's so
I,
good.
I love it. And obviously, things are still not, perfect. I don't want
Right.
anybody, like new believers, to think, that life is going to be all perfect. But what I will say is that he's taught me of his faithfulness in the
Mhm.
middle of trial and in the middle of heartbreak and in the middle of grief. He's been consistent. God is the one thing that has been consistent, and he's been a pillar. And yeah, I'm so grateful for his faithfulness.
That's so amazing. How did you and your husband meet?
So we actually met online, which
Okay.
is also unheard of. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that is. I could tell you some horror stories of like dating apps and online dating and
yeah.
all the things.
Yeah, so we met online, and we both I had been abstinent, I think, for like 9 years, and he
Mm,
was abstinent too, so we were very clear about our intentions and our expectations. And yeah,
yeah,
it just
that's so good. That's
happened.
so good. See, that's very simple, and not a lot of people I think can say that they had a
Yeah.
successful dating app experience. So tell us about your book. So you have three books.
Yes.
Tell us all about them. What does each one?
Yeah, so I was talking about how God had to teach me that He was my Father, and one of the ways that He did that is through my first book. It's a 30-day devotional entitled "Father: A Journey to
Mhm.
Discovering God." And basically, God just highlighted stories of me and my dad, and how like he was an even greater father than my
Wow.
dad was. And so that's one of the ways that He taught me like the parallels between Him being my father and Him loving me even better than my dad could. Ready Writer is my poetry collection. So that is my lifespan of poetry in a book. And it's kind of set up to be like I'm on stage. So you read through what I would say before I would do the poem.
That's so
Um,
good.
yeah, so that's my poetry collection. And then Perspectives actually was birthed out of that year-long journey that I was talking about.
Mm.
When I would ask God, is this his character? I would go and study, and I would want to respond, and he would say, no, put it in the book. And so Perspectives is a 30-day devotional about taking a different look at scripture in the correct context. So yeah.
That's so good. And then you also have book consulting. What does that would
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah, so I do author or publishing consulting. So I sit down with individuals that have a desire to write, that
Mhm.
know that they have a calling to publish their books, and I walk them through a process of what's best for them as far as completing that project. And then I also do publishing consulting where I educate people on the different types of publishing, and we kind of
That's
talk
so
about what's
cool.
best for them, what route is best to take with them.
That's so awesome. So, do you do publishing or work in publishing or what
Not
does or
yet.
no, not
Not
yet. Okay.
yet.
Maybe that was prophetic. Like you're gonna have your own
Yeah,
publishing company.
I've heard that a few times, but I'm not there just quite. Yeah.
That's so awesome. I love it. Um, and so Ready Writers Publishing, is that just the consulting kind of that goes with it?
Yeah, so it's called Ready Writer Books.
Okay.
That's the consulting company. Yep.
That's
You
so
said
good.
publishing, so it'll turn into that eventually. Yeah.
Woo! One day I get a credit for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Well, can you give us some of your writing? Can you read us a little something?
For sure. I just wrote this poem. last week, I think.
Oh my
'Cause
goodness.
I was kind of in a rut where I wasn't writing a lot. Um,
Okay.
and so I wrote this because a lot of my poetry was rooted in like trials and things like that. So
Yeah.
this is called Return from War. I believe that good writing can exist outside of pain. I just haven't found it yet. And if I have to travel back to the trenches to discover my words, I just won't be explorer. Some of these battles have become far in the distance, but in all honesty, I've just learned how to fight different. See, I found my home away from war, and this piece be like porcelain in the curia of my frame, a marker of history I'm not willing to part with. This joy is the best thing I've ever tasted, even in the presence of bitter cuisine, a desert I'm not willing to pass on. The rest, the greatest comfort away from the chaos, a bed too cozy to leave. This land I inherited holds the richest soil, always yielding a crop to sustain me, a harvest too great to abandon. So I pray I can piece together something sweet from these victories. I pray these war stories give grounding to those coming home, that these battle wounds be encouragement to those in the thick of their tours. I pray the wars I've won be hope for those still fighting. I don't see myself enlisting again. So I pray I find more words here.
Oh my gosh, girl, that is so good. Oh my gosh. And that's what, like, when I first came across you, your spoken word, like how you speak, like so boldly and like so prophetic, that is such a gift. Like, oh my gosh, yeah. Do you have any speaking engagements or anything like that, like open mics or anything like that?
No, not coming up. Me
Not
and my
coming up.
poetry group are still trying to get it together. We've had, I think, about 4 babies and 3 marriages in the last 4 years. So.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that'll take up a lot of your time. Well, perfect. Brittany, where can everybody find you? Tell us all the things, your books, all the things.
For sure, yeah. I'm on Instagram as Brittney Sharice, and then my website is readywriterbooks.com. All of my merchandise and my books and consulting can be found there.
Perfect. Well, I will have everything down in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on today. I loved this conversation. I know everyone will too. I will have all of Brittany's information down in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. And Brittany, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I loved it.
Yes, welcome back anytime. I hope this episode blessed you today. If it did, please rate and review the show. It helps grow the podcast to reach more Proverbs 31 creatives just like you. Don't forget to follow the show so you'll automatically be notified when the next episode drops. I'll be praying for you. See you next week.